Hi, my name is John Hamilton. I'm from Christ Church in Montevideo, and we're continuing with our series on the Gospel of John, and today we're in chapter 14 in the first 7 verses. And as we begin, I want to ask us a question. Do you ever feel anxious? I know I feel anxious. I get anxious just preparing this talk. And so troubled and worked up, and we have times of profound anxiety, and sometimes we even have whole seasons of anxiety in our life, or whole entire stages of our life where anxiety really can take a hold. I'm reading and studying about anxiety. I signed up for Steve Cuss's course, Capable Life, after reading his book, Managing Leadership Anxiety, Yours and Theirs. And Steve Cuss talks about how we can be affected by 4, 5, 6 different sources of anxiety at some time, anytime that we're aware of, but we could be impacted by many more. There could be 30 or 40 different sources of anxiety that are hitting our life. And so it's really helpful when we can begin to identify them, have the awareness, the self-awareness to reflect and say, where is this anxiety coming from? What causes it? And identify that for ourselves and begin to name it. I learned that it's fairly normal to have at least some level of anxiety. And one of the challenges is to not deny it. And so the main challenge is to be aware, become more self-aware. Where is it coming from? How is it impacting me? And give it a name. And say, I'm afraid of speaking in public, and that somebody might not like what I have to say and criticize me, and so then I would be like a bad person. And so sometimes we trace it all the way back to find out what is the root, what is really causing this anxiety. And once we can name it and put it out in the open, we can say, wow, well, no, that would be silly. And we can begin to dominate it. Anyway, today, the point is not to talk about anxiety, and probably quite a few people listening to me right now know more about it than I do. But I do want to talk about the significance of Jesus' words in John 14 when he said, do not let your hearts be troubled. Don't be anxious. And these are words that with some frequency have been misinterpreted, perhaps miscommunicated, because they're often taken out of context. Now, anytime we take something out of context, a phrase out of context, then we are very easily tempted to use it to mean what we want it to mean, to use it to say something that we want it to say, and to sort of ignore or forget whatever it was that the author originally meant to say. And I know today someone will say, hey, that's okay. Let each person give the words their meaning. Each person has their own truth. Okay, well, I find that to be attractive. It would be great to live in that fantasy world where I'm really the center of my own universe, and I can escape from the cruel realities of my circumstances and the world that I live in, and sort of assign a new meaning to all of the things around me and the words. That's an attractive possibility at times. But what is curious is the fact that the very anxiety that I don't want to feel is a gift, because it's what holds me tied onto the realities of life. In other words, my anxieties really grow out of the realities of my life, which are making noise in the back of my head or my heart and saying, notice me, name me, deal with me. And so when I open the Bible to John chapter 14, and I hear this preacherly tone, do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God, trust also in me. My first reaction is, what is he talking about? That is not so easy. It's not easy for me to not be anxious. It's not even natural. And so then the text goes on to talk about mansions in the sky And well, people have told me, it doesn't really say mansions, but going to prepare a place, a house with many rooms. And so is Jesus like up there working on that now? And where is that? Well, these are good questions, but many of these questions come up because we haven't read the text. So let's read the text. Let's begin with verse 1. Wait a minute. Why would we begin with verse 1? Well, that's how the text is divided. But what if Jesus was in the middle of a conversation and the editor interpreted where to put the break, the end of one chapter and the beginning of another? Jesus didn't talk with chapters and verses. In fact, in this particular story, the chapter breaks right in the middle of a conversation. And so I don't want to begin with verse 1. In fact, if you were listening to the previous talk on chapter 13 and the dinner full of surprises, then you would remember that Jesus was there in a dinner with his closest 12 disciples. And in that dinner, there were many reasons to feel anxious, many things that provoked anxiety, including John wrote in chapter 13, verse 21, that Jesus himself was profoundly moved. And my text here says, troubled in spirit. And so that means anxiety. So let's remember quickly, what were some of the things from chapter 13? Remember, if you read it or you listened last week, what are some of the things that caused anxiety for them? For example, Jesus washed the feet of all his disciples, and that generated clearly anxiety in several of them. Jesus declared that one of them was going to betray him. That had to cause some anxiety. Jesus himself was profoundly troubled in his spirit, and I imagine that several of them recognized that. Another cause, Judas suddenly got up and went out into the night, and nobody seemed to know where he was going or what he was doing or when he was coming back. And so some people would not be bothered by that, but others would want to know, what's the plan? What's going on? And so that generated some anxiety. Jesus said that he was going to be with them only for a short time in verse 33. Jesus said that he was going away and that they could not go with him for now. Jesus said that they needed to love one another just like he had loved them, wash each other's feet, and that had to generate some anxiety. Jesus told Peter, he told Peter, tonight you are going to deny me 3 times. So nobody was understanding anything. There had to be a lot of anxiety. So let's read from verse 36. Let's go back and pick up about halfway through that meal, actually towards the end of that event, and see if we can make the connection between what's happening in chapter 13 and what Jesus says in chapter 14. Verse 36, chapter 13. Simon Peter asked him, Lord, where are you going? And Jesus replied, where I am going, you cannot follow now, but later you will follow. And Peter said, Lord, why can't I follow you now? I will lay down my life for you. And Jesus answered, will you really lay down your life for me? Very truly I tell you, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Do you believe in God? Believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms, and if that were not so, would I have told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, so that where I am, there you will be also. You know the way to the place that I'm going. And Thomas said to him, Lord, we don't know where you are going, so how can we know the way? And Jesus answered, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you really know me, you will know my Father as well. And from now on, you do know him, and you have seen him. Now, are you hearing what I heard? Jesus is profoundly troubled in his spirit. Judas heads out into the night. Peter says, Lord, where are you going? And Peter passionately insists on behalf of everyone, why can't I follow you now? I will give my life for you. We know that Peter was really committed. He was speaking the truth of his heart in spite of his anxiety. Peter, later on in the night, was going to take out his gaucho knife and face the multitude that was coming at him all by himself to protect Jesus. He was willing to die to accompany Jesus. The emotions in that room were major. So Jesus receives this passionate declaration, affirmation of love from Peter with some really sort of a harsh or dry or tough comment. He looks straight at Peter and he says, "Thank you, my friend. I really need your support right now." No, that's not what he says. He looks at Peter and he says, "Really, Peter? I'll tell you the truth. Tonight you will disown me 3 times. I can only imagine the silence in that room at that moment. Heavy, overwhelming. It's like Jesus just took all the oxygen out of the room. Have you ever felt anxiety in your chest, in your throat, that you can hardly breathe, you can barely talk, and your voice comes out kind of strange? You have knots in your stomach and your heart's pounding, your hands are sweating or they're frozen. And those guys there, they didn't know, should they look at Peter? Should they look at Jesus? Should they look at the floor? It had to be terribly uncomfortable. The only good thing is that their feet were clean, and Jesus said that was enough. Actually, what Jesus meant by that is that his work on the cross, serving them, his greatest act of service on the cross was going to be enough. There was nothing else that could be done or needed to be done. But it's in this context that Jesus says to them, this moment of terrible awkwardness and anxiety, that Jesus says, "Do not let your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe in me." It's not an order. It's not a command. It's an invitation. Of course they're anxious. And to have an appropriate anxiety, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing strange about that. But Jesus is actually what we call reading the room. And he wants to give back he wants to encourage them. He wants to invite them to trust in him, to trust in the process that they're experiencing, to trust in the character of God, who is always faithful, always wise. He knows the best, always merciful. And so he sort of wants to redirect their perspective with his next words. And he says, "I'm going to the Father." And it's like the bridegroom goes ahead to prepare a place for his bride. And then he comes back, but he's preparing the way. And so I want you to trust that I'm preparing the way for you. I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. And Peter is asking about a geographic location. What's the destination, Lord? Where are you going? And Jesus is saying, you know what? The destination is certain, but your challenge is to follow the way. And I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life, follow me. But they're confused in their anxiety. They can't see, they can't comprehend. They're like us. They see everything around is getting darker. John wrote, it was already night. And Jesus wants to encourage them, and he wants to give them ánimo, I'm trying to say it in Spanish. He wants to lift them up. And he says, look, guys, you need to love each other, and you need to follow me, and you need to trust. I'm not showing you the way. I am the way. I'm not teaching you the truths about life. I am the truth. I'm not talking about life. I am the life. What makes Jesus special is that all the religious systems have us trying to get up out of the cosmos into the presence of God. And Jesus says, I come from the presence of God, and I am the way back to God. Follow me. And so it's a cosmic declaration. It's not about the destination, it's about the journey. It's about the process. In these 5 chapters, 13 to 17, the Greek mentions 40 times the cosmos, the world. And so Jesus is saying, as it were, there's a curtain, and beyond the curtain, you can't see. You're never going to know what's going to happen tomorrow. You have to trust that I'm there with the Father, preparing everything. And so I want to promise you, I'm opening the way, the cosmic way, for everybody, for everything, for all of creation. Where there is confusion, I am the truth. Where there is darkness, I am the light. Where there is death and depression and anxiety, I am life. I want you to trust me. Perhaps you've never read John 14, verses 1 to 6, 1 to 7, and connected Jesus' words with Psalm 46. Listen to the words. Psalm 46, verses 1 to 5. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in times of trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth gives way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. All followers of Christ are the place where God now dwells. Jesus goes on to explain that in chapter 14. So there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her. God is with you. You will not fall. God will help you at the break of day. Do you have anxiety? It's normal. Where does it come from? Name it. Notice it. Name it. Confront it. Are you troubled in your spirit? Take time to know and to notice. Why? Where is it coming from? Bring your fears out to the light of the day. Bring your fears out to the light of God. Your city, your life will not fall if you're trusting in the Lord. If you're following Christ, at the dawn, His help will come. Psalm 46, 1 to 5. Trust in the Lord, and may God bless you as you go through this week.